Welcome back to the Myrna Method live stream. I'm registered dietitian Myrna Haag, here to bring you impactful nutrition information that you can use to greatly improve your life. Because that's what nutrition does. Nutrition does right. Understanding information, you can change around ill health, give yourself more energy. And what we're going to talk in this video is, should you have carbs? Are carbs part of a diet? Can they be eliminated from the diet? I mean, after all, everywhere you look, they're talking about carbs aren't needed. So in this video, I think when we get done, you'll be able to make that decision just how important carbs are, or if you should be eliminating them from your diet. So Sam, if you'll switch it over, let's start on the PowerPoint. So big question, should you be cutting carbs from your diet? Well, you know, most people are cutting carbs because they're blaming them on weight gain, makes them fat. They heard carbs were bad for them. And some people just say, I stop eating carbs and I feel better. And there is science to that. When I talk about type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, I'll touch a little bit tonight, but I think what I really want to focus on in this video is carbs themselves. But stopping carbs from your diet or not eating them, there could be maybe some benefits there, but that has more to do with the fact that you don't know how to balance them. You don't know how to eat them. It's not about avoiding them. It's about understanding how to eat them. So it's not really what you eat, but it's more on how you eat. How about pre-diabetes diagnosis? It seems like carbs are a big culprit for that, when in fact, they are not. So carbs right now are kind of a fad, right? I mean, it's almost like keto this, keto that. Everything is literally high fat. And I'm not saying that you should do low fat. I'm saying that you've got to take these macronutrients and you've got to put them in perspective. The macronutrients being protein, fiber, fats, and carbs. So carbohydrates is one macronutrient that we're really quick to say we don't need, we don't want, makes us fat. But what is a carbohydrate? A lot of people maybe aren't sure. Carbohydrates are starches. They're going to be the potatoes, the apples, the bananas, the breads, the pastas. So these are the carbohydrates. They break down into glucose. And it's the glucose in the bloodstream that's getting the bad rap. It's actually the glucose in the bloodstream that is trying to get to the muscles to make a difference. So bottom line, are carbs required? Carbs aren't required. So you don't need carbs to survive. But they're very critical for long-term weight loss and health. And that's why I think this video is super important. Because a lot of people are under this misconception that they can just take carbs out of their diet. After all, it's being blamed for weight gain. They might feel better, but they don't understand that you've got to figure out how these carbs work in your diet. You got to figure that out. That's what we're going to talk about, is how they work. Bottom line, you consume carbohydrates, they're transported to glucose, and then we just have heard that it gets used for energy. But don't we use fat for energy? Well, in fact, we do. The two main fuels that really help us get the energy is coming from sugar and fat. And it's taking place in a little organelle called a mitochondria, and that mitochondria burns carbohydrates and fat simultaneously. So we're going to talk about that burn because it's really important, and it's why carbs make such a difference in your diet. And also how the carbs and fat are stored. So the two biggest reasons why you want carbs is because the way they're burned in the muscle and the way they're stored. So let's get right down to it and understand what the difference is. Well, fats are actually slow oxidizers. So they burn slower in the mitochondria, and that's because it's harder to get to them. So the mitochondria has to work harder to get the energy out of the fats. So they're slow burners, where carbs are actually fast burners. The muscle can get right to the energy with a carbohydrate. So why is this important? And when do we need either one than the other? So when we look at how it works, when you are at a lower level of energy, your body doesn't need to worry about getting quick access to fuel. So here's the muscle being active, and it has to sustain this activity. And the best way to do that is get immediate fuel in the mitochondria to sustain that activity. If it's depending on fat to sustain higher activity, it's not going to happen. Fat is used when activity is required at a lower level. So when you're resting, let's say 90% of what you burn is fat because the body's trying to conserve the carbs, which I'm going to explain later when we talk about the actual storage of both. So when you're burning at a lower level, your calories are at a lower level. Even though you're burning 90% of your energy at rest, maybe you're sleeping, it's maybe only 100 calories worth of fat fuel. Now, as you begin to add more activity, the muscle can't get to the fat as readily. So the muscle then uses the carbohydrate because it can get to it quicker. Now, the muscle, the mitochondria, I'm talking about muscle because I'm referring to activity, but the mitochondria, which basically grows in number and size, so the more active you are, the more mitochondria you have, which means the more muscle, the more sports, the more you walk, the more you do things to create movement in your body will create more mitochondria. These are the burners in your body. This is what's creating the energy, so it makes sense. We want to be more active so we can get more mitochondria. They grow in number and size, double, triple, when you're more active than when you're sedentary. These mitochondria burn fat and sugar simultaneously, but the more active you are, they need quick access to fuel, and they're not going to get it from fat like they're going to get it from sugar. So the muscle is going to always want to keep a storage of fat and sugar, which we're going to talk about next, because that can have huge implications on food addiction and how your body can actually get type 2 diabetes. So in relationship to burning, just 25% heart rate above your VO2 max. So to give it to you from a heart rate percentage, if you were your resting heart rate was, let's say, 70 beats a minute, and that heart rate goes up to 90 beats a minute, which my heart rate right now could easily have gone up 20 beats per minute, just me talking to you, more energetic, right? So you're going to get an increase in heart rate with the more activity, the more energetic you are. So just by increasing 25%, your fat percentage drops from 90 down to 60, but the big key here is in order to get that fat burning at a higher caloric value, although you're burning 60% fat, it's at 300 calories. When you're burning 40% fat, it's 500 calories worth of fat. And when your heart rate's up at 85% and you're really pushing that sport, that's going to have your calories and fat could be as high as 700. And of course, it's based on the person and their body size. I'm just kind of using these as examples, okay? So for you to actually start to burn more calories and fat, it takes quick access to fuel. In other words, your muscle needs quick access to fuel to burn more fat during activity. If you don't have access to quick fuel, you don't have those carbohydrates stored in the muscle, it doesn't mean you're not going to be active. You're just not going to be vigorously active. You'll actually get a decrease in motivation in some of the activity. Now, I want to do a little caveat here, because the liver, as soon as you start exercising, the liver will put sugar into the blood. But that's short-lived. It's a small amount to get you through that activity. And the reason is because the liver knows if you're out there exercising, the body thinks maybe a lion's chasing you or something's going on where you need to fight or flight. And the liver wants to make sure that that muscle gets quick access fuel. So if you're looking at it from sustaining a healthy lifestyle, which is really what we want to do, we have to look at it as its entirety. We have to look at the big picture. Active muscles want carbs. They don't need carbs. If I go back to this example, the muscle can burn or the mitochondria, the fuel in the body can just be burned with fat. So the body can literally exist just for fuel on fat, which gives a lot of credit, let's say, to the keto diet, which is mostly going to be the high-fat diet, low carb. You can sustain on that. But I'm going to show you why it's not so smart. And in the long run, you're not going to be able to get higher levels of performance. Now, the liver might dump a little sugar in there. You might get 30, 40, maybe 45 minutes of a good workout, but then you're done. It's short-lived. If you're an athlete and you're really trying to sustain a really good performance in athletics, you're going to not be able to do it on a keto diet. So when we're looking at burning, we know that the body burns the carbs more quickly, which is what the muscle wants for higher activity. So active muscles want carbs, period. End of story. Active muscles that have less carbs are no longer active muscles. You will lose the intensity in your movement. You will lose the vigor in your step. Fats are slow oxidizers. They like to be burned when the muscle is calmer and it can get to those fats much easier. So fats can't be used with the higher level of activity, just can't. So in essence, what I'm really saying is that carbs are actually very beneficial, especially if you want to burn more fat. You will burn the highest calories in fat in the presence of a carb, because it's the carb that allows you to get to that high level of fitness, and it's the muscle that needs that quick access of fuel to keep you at that high level of activity. And what you get in return is a much higher caloric burn of fat. Now, the percentage of fat may be less, but the caloric burn, the total fat, will be more. So carbs are really great as far as you lowering your overall fat. One thing else I want to mention is that you're not going to be burning the fat readily from the fat cell when you're actually moving, because the muscle's just more interested in getting the job done while you're moving, using the carbs and using the immediate stores of fat within the muscle. So let's talk about the storage of the carbohydrates and the storage of the fat in the muscle, because this is where it gets super interesting as far as your diet, in respect to you actually falling into a little bit of a carb addiction. Let me explain. So glycogen, which is stored glucose in the muscle, it's about 1,500 calories worth of glycogen. So it's pretty limited. So carbs have this limited capacity in the muscle, and it comes mostly from the diet and, of course, from the liver that shoots a little glucose in times of need. So the muscle is depending on mostly your diet to be able to have the fuel that allows you to move vigorously, in essence, burn more fat during movement. When that glycogen level gets low, maybe you're on a low-carb diet, you're exercising more than you're taking in, the glycogen actually sends, the low glycogen, the depletion of glycogen, sends a message to the brain in the hypothalamus. Neurotransmitter Y says, look, we need more carbs, because the muscle is only interested in trying to keep that capacity so that you can continue with your vigorous movement. So basically what happens is you get a little bit of a carb addiction going. So in your low carb diet, you're doing great Monday through Friday. You know the story. You seem to be losing a lot of weight, but it's water weight. For every gram of glucose, you're going to store 3 grams of water with it. So when you go on a low-carb diet, in essence, you lose a lot of muscle, a lot of water from the muscle. The other thing that happens, so you basically are dehydrated at a cellular level. And then the other thing that happens is the muscle gets triggered. The muscle triggers the brain to crave more carbs. Because all the brain needs to think about is, golly, I got to get those carbs back in the muscle. Now, fats are a little different. Fats have more of an unlimited capacity. And just to give you a relationship of the difference in the caloric storage of energy, fats can literally store as much as 30,000 calories worth of fuel. So everybody's all hyped up on the fats and they say, well, isn't this better? I mean, after all, we don't need these carbs. To not have carbs, first of all, you are going to trigger a mini food addiction because the brain's going to want them. The brain wants to replenish the glycogen store, and you dehydrate, right? You lose that hydration because when you get rid of the carbs, think of it, carbohydrates, when you get rid of the carbs, you are really getting rid of a lot of the water in the muscle. Now, the difference with the calories, if you think about it, 30,000 calories is a lot of calories to be burning. So the muscle can store really a lot more fat. And also, to replenish the muscle, it waits till you're done being vigorously moving, and it will pull some of the fats from the fat cells to feed the muscle cells so that the muscle can have that immediate store of fatty acids along with the glucose. Now, a lot of people think that's a really good thing. But honestly, this is where exercise alone doesn't really help you with weight loss. And why in my program, I talk about how to balance your diet and really look at the macronutrients, protein, fiber, carbs, and fat, how those work in your diet. If after exercise, you're at a calorie deficit overall for the day, then you can begin to pull some of the fats from your fat cells to feed the muscle. But this is going to be more of a caloric issue. For the end of the day, you're not really doing it during exercise. You're burning fat during exercise, but it's taking place more immediate in the muscle because that's where the muscle is trying to get to it, trying to get at it, and get that movement going. So when you're moving, it's really a muscle thing. So honestly, when you're looking at carbs and you're trying to figure out, do I really need them? Well, it's really a function of, are they allowing you to maintain your leanest, healthiest, most energetic weight? Because that's really the key. When carb storage becomes depleted, there's more of food binging going on. Muscles also lose hydration. So from a perspective of overall health, we really want to try to figure out how not to do food binging, because when you're on a weight loss program, it's not really about starving yourself. It's about living a lifestyle where you really want to eat less. That's really the ticket. And by eliminating carbs from your diet, that's really not going to be the case, because you're going to have a constant craving to have more of these carbs. And you'll see it a lot with athletes. They tell me they eat really great Monday through Friday. They're losing weight during the week. They're loving it. And then all of a sudden, that Saturday night comes, or that Saturday's their binge day, or they call it their cheat day. And then they really gain back about 4 or 5 pounds, which they really aren't gaining 4 or 5 pounds of fat. It's most likely water, because you bring back the carbs and you bring back the water. So you can literally gain 4 or 5 pounds of water, and you can lose 4 or 5 pounds of water. So muscles need hydration. It reduces food addiction, and it increases the motivation to move more energetically. And actually, with carbs, you're going to burn more total fat in exercise because you'll be able to get to the higher levels of intensity, which will always burn more fat. So the next question is, how much carbs do I need for the day? I want to keep the muscles from wanting food addiction. I wanted to keep enough glycogen in there so I can move vigorously. So an easy formula is you take your ideal body weight. So maybe your ideal body weight's 120 pounds. You multiply it by 1.3. This is your ideal body weight. And then you're going to come up with, this is 156. We'll just round it to 160. So this is 160 grams of carbs based on your ideal body weight multiplied by 1.3. So this is an approximation of how much carbs your muscle feels really good with. Now, if you go to exercise, we can add anywhere from 30 grams to 60 grams. So 30 grams would be a banana. So you're out there for an hour of exercise. You're maybe doing 35 to 40% of your max, which will go back here, your VO2 max, heart rate. So you're right here in this area. You're going to burn more calories and fat, but bottom line, you don't need many carbs. Once you get above your daily amount, it's a banana more. So when you exercise for an hour, it would be more like a 190. Now here's the key. I would take these carbs and have them right before I go out there and walk, because then the muscle gets the immediate sugar, which is such a benefit for the muscle. When we look at how all of this works from a muscle brain perspective and the storage, the muscles, every time you eat a carbohydrate, the carbohydrate is going towards the muscles to fuel it for your sport. Or maybe it's just going to the muscles to fuel it, period. Insulin is also released. And when insulin is released, every time you eat a carbohydrate, the main purpose of insulin is to attach to a receptor site. And when it attaches to a receptor site, it talks to a messenger, talks to another messenger, and this transporter comes to the surface. When that transporter comes to the surface, then the sugar, it goes into the muscle, filling up the glycogen, combining with water. But when you have a diet that is excessive in fats and even excessive in sugars, or you are just too fat, you've gained too much weight, you can actually clog up this receptor site. So now insulin is not able to communicate to the transporter, and the transporter doesn't come to the surface, and now you have a lot of sugar in the blood. And this is what happens a lot with insulin resistance, and why a lot of people say, but I feel better when I don't eat carbs. Well, you feel better when you don't eat carbs because you have a problem with carbs. When you have a situation where you have a lot of this glucose in the blood, because of the fact you had too much excess fatty acids that accumulated in the muscle cells. So remember I said to you, the muscle cells have this unlimited capacity to bring in all these fats. Well, as you get fatter, your body releases more fats from fat cells. Let's say you're having a diet that you're just not even paying attention to the amount of fat you're eating, and you're eating a high-fat diet. All of this can increase the fatty acids within the muscle cell. Now, we know that doesn't make you more energetic to want to go out and just push harder in sports. It can give you more slow-burning fuel, but not the fast-access fuel that gets you motivated to want to get to the gym. But the worst thing this does is it causes a condition called insulin resistance. It also changes some of these fats. You've seen it in some of my other videos. These ceramides, it can be damaging. And what happens is the sugar begins to go inside the fat cell. That means you get fatter. But what can happen with exercise, it makes this unique, vigorous movement, is there's no insulin required to move sugar into a muscle cell. What happens is this transporter comes to the surface, and regardless of what's going on with the insulin, so you don't need insulin to move sugar from the blood into the muscle. So every time you work out, your body is pulling sugar from the blood into the muscle. And why do you think that's the case? Because muscles want sugar to be able to get to that quick energy. And I'm not even saying even 25% above your VO2 max. I'm saying heart rate maybe 20 beats above your resting. That's enough activity to really have the body want more of these fast oxidizers so you can continue this vigorous movement. And a lot of people, when they do a low carb diet and they do start exercising, the muscles release these catecholamines that tell the liver, you better release some sugar because these muscles are moving and they need some fast oxidizers. And that's what can happen with a lot of these low carb diets. And you can always see an athlete that's on a low carb diet, because when you first start getting them in the gym and you exercise them as a trainer, this is what I would find, they're slugs, right? They're just like, oh gosh, if I didn't have you as a trainer, I'd never get here. They didn't even want to get motivated to go. But as soon as they start moving, miraculously, the liver dumps sugar in the blood. And when the liver dumps this sugar in the blood, it's for one reason. It's to get it in the muscle and get this person with some activity, with some intensity, because the body doesn't know that they're at the gym just exercising for health, actually believes maybe they're in the wild and it's a fight or flight situation. And every time you exercise, the beautiful thing is that muscles are so hungry for sugar, they so want those fat oxidizing little compounds that the transporters move right to the surface. So even if you're a type 2 diabetic, even if you've got all these receptor sites all gunked up, you can still take sugar from the blood into the muscle, which is why with diabetes, they always talk about exercise reverses diabetes, which it really doesn't. This is the root cause of diabetes. But what it does do is it takes sugar from the blood, puts it into the muscle, same as you eating a diet balanced in carbs. That's the ticket. If you have insulin resistance, then carbs may not feel so good when you are not exercising, because what happens in that case is the sugar doesn't get to the muscle. And a lot of times when you have insulin resistance and you are eating carbs, you may not feel good eating them because they're in the bloodstream and they're not going in the muscle like they should, which is the reason why a lot of times people say, I eliminate the carbs from my diet and I feel better. Well, of course you're going to feel better if you have insulin resistance. It still doesn't mean that the muscles aren't starving for carbs. That's really key here. Muscles want carbs. Not required. They can use fats all by themselves to burn and keep the fuel going, but not when it comes to activity that's going to be vigorous. Unless, of course, the liver does its sugar dump, which in most cases for people on really low carb diets, the liver will do that in periods of exercise, or they get to the gym. Like I said, that's where they'll see that. They'll see that increase in energy. After they come in, they're on the treadmill, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then they get the burst of second energy. That's that liver dumping the sugar in to get it to the muscle so it can be a fast oxidizer, can create more fat burning, and can get you moving vigorously. How long does that last? You're lucky with a 40-minute hit, maybe 45. So it's not a lot of sugar you're going to get from the muscle to sustain that. And then, by the way, you got to go through the rest of the day, which may be a little slower in the intensity. So as far as carbs, and what I really wanted to bring home with this is that carbs are really an important part of your diet. It's a macronutrient you don't want to eliminate. Carbohydrates, when you're not exercising, you want to, during the day, eat them with enough fiber and protein to slow the entry into the bloodstream. And that's the big ticket I always talk about when I'm working with patients, balancing their diet. I'm bringing in that protein and fiber when you're not moving, because when you are moving, the muscle's ready for those carbs. You start exercising, you do a banana literally 10 minutes before you go to the gym. these transporters will come to the surface, and whatever sugar you're putting in there goes right to the muscle. During the day, that's a different deal. During the day, you now need insulin to shuttle the sugar into the muscle cell. And if you're not eating a balanced diet, it's a problem. Or if you're eating carbs by themselves, you're going to get a massive dump of sugar in the blood, and you're going to have a situation of a lot of insulin. It's going to cause a lot of issues with blood sugar. Not a good thing. How we change that is we put protein and fiber into your diet with the carbs, and this slows down the entry of the glucose into the blood. Totally different situation. So when people tell me I feel better on a keto diet, they feel better not eating carbs, I have a really good hunch that we've got some issues with the insulin receptor site. And that's one of the reasons why they don't tolerate them well. So is the answer to just remove carbs from the diet? No. The answer is to learn to eat them balanced in your meals. Understand the purpose of the carbs. Work with your diet in creating your healthiest diet by understanding it's a balanced diet, not eliminating the macronutrients, knowing how to eat them. Okay, Sam, if you will switch it over to see if we have any chats. I hope this helped. You can always go to Myrna Method and get into my membership. I love it. I really talk about how you balance these macronutrients, which is so key to knowing how to eat to live your leanest and healthiest. So, Sam, if you'll take us to the chat, see if we have any questions.
Nope, not tonight, but we do have just a mention of our subscribers.
Yep. We have, I think we're up over 600.
Yes, we are.
Woo! Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. I can't tell you how much I love doing this. Being of value to you is very, very fulfilling for me. Diet makes a difference. So next week, who knows what we'll do next week? You can write in. You can tell me certain things you want me to go over. Thank you. And until next week, I'll see you next time.